Here we go. In 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Welcome to the Makers Toolbox. I'm Beau Turner from 757 Makerspace, and joining me today is Scott Clark, the man, the myth, the legend behind sculpting and clay and molding and casting, but more importantly, a special effects artist. And he's going to share with us today an introduction, understanding what clay is, how these things work, and specifically towards sculpture. You'll see that we do have some sculptural items over here to the side. As we have questions going along here, Scott's going to share a little bit of background. He'll kind of rotate this, but mostly we want to keep this loose so he has a chance to share and impart some of the knowledge that he's got. And also, we're going to find out what's inside of Scott's Maker Toolbox. All right, let's welcome Scott.
What's up, guys? How you doing today? All right, we're going to start with talking about the types of clay, because you use clays for many different things. You want to make jewelry. You want to make sculpture, obviously. You want to make a latex mask. You want to get into mold making and casting. All of these things fall underneath clay. So we're going to go over the different types of clay, what I would prefer that you would use for one and not so much for another. We'll talk about the way they're made. We'll get too into it, but we'll go over some of the categories. So I want to start with water-based clay, which is wet clay, or pottery clay, which is a lot of people are used to fine arts and stuff like that. It's good for big stuff. It's good for giant statues. It's good for ceramics. It's good for a lot of things. It's not good to use inside your house. It gets real dusty. It's definitely a studio or an outdoor medium. Then there's oil clays like Chavant, which a lot of the effects guys like to use. Oil-based clays are Plastilina, Roma Plastilina. Chavant makes an oil base. That's mainly their jam. I don't use oil clay that much because it smells and it's residual more so than the other clays. It's dangerous to try to heat up because it is oil and it separates and it can be dangerous. Something to keep in mind if you have children, you want to have them working with clay. It's very fingerprinty on everything inside the house. Then there's the poly clays, which are like a Sculpey that you see at Michael's. And you can make, your kids can make Christmas ornaments for grandma, or it's fun hobby stuff for the kids. They can learn how to be safe with it. It's food grade, so it's kind of safe to have around the kids, and it's a good learning, good start. Not too much commitment. It's very expensive, but they're always usually small chunks. So if you want them to just get used to it, get their feet wet and their hands busy, that's a good way to go. Then there's the wax clays. This is Monster Clay, which is a wax-based clay. I like to use this a lot for modeling. I use it for everything. I even use it for creating flange, which is a thing that you do for making molds. And that's another path we'll go on later. So there's like wax-based clays. This is a good one because it has a good low temp melt, which means that it can go fluid without burning you if it gets on you too much. So it goes on real nice, and this is a hard grade, so when it's done, it's very hard. It's almost like wood. They have different grades. There's medium, soft, and hard. I like the hard because you can hit it with the heat and bring it back down. This stuff is so tough, you can take sandpaper to it to fine-tune, just like it was marble or something. Then there's straight wax. A lot of people don't think of wax as something that you would use for sculpting, but you do. Dental techs use it all the time to create dentures and partial dentures. It's also used for movies where they make veneers, which is basically like the vampire teeth from Lost Boys, where they sculpt with wax the vampire teeth and they fit perfectly onto your other teeth because you had those cast at the dentist.
This has been in the microwave as a full tub. I think we had about 9 minutes or so.
Yeah, it's about 9 minutes. Yeah, so it's almost like soup.
Yeah, so this material, you can actually see it kind of fluid on the inside. It's still loose on the edges, but it is molten in that middle part. That gives you a pretty good view to be able to see what's happening there.
So you want to create your mask. And this is another tool that you need to have when you're working on this business is anatomy books, anatomy charts, animal anatomy books for creating animals so that you got everything to par. Also to scale, you're making things that are normally larger or smaller than normal human life or animal life. So you got to keep that in mind too. So you want your anatomy to work. This is a anime type of alien sculpture I did, but you got to think about the aesthetics of it. I wanted to make sure that this piece had some human attributes, but not look ridiculous. Like there's a rule between the eyes we all have, which is basically our eyes are as far apart as a single eye right in the middle between the two eyes. So to scale, I use this eye, even though it's large, to set the measurement proportions for the entire head so that it makes sense when you look at it. This lady, I made my own tools. This is a bandsaw blade that was broken with some brass conduit. And then I made a loop tool. There's another side of it right there. This is a loop tool that I made out of 9-gauge steel. These are all for creating planes and textures and whatnot. And the reason I made these is because this clay is so hard that you can actually break a tool that's normally made. So if I wanted to texture this thing, I would use this one because it's so strong. So don't be afraid to make your own tools. You don't always have to buy them. Also, I like to sculpt big, so I like to make big tools because I break little tools all the time. So you get to be an inventor of your own kind of trade after a while, but you can see right there how it's kind of planing it out. It's almost like sandpaper effect right there. So got to still build up that anatomy.
Can you sand this like it's Bondo?
Yeah, you can sand it like it's Bondo. It's got to be cold though. Like this is a hard grade right here. I don't have any
When you say hard grade, what does hard grade mean?
There's different grades of basically there's fillers and a wax medium going on with this. So they sell hard, medium, and soft. So you can buy a soft one, which means it's got more polymers in it that make it a little bit more fluid, a little bit more flexible, kind of like Sculpey. But what happens is that something like that, it's good for practice. It's good for mold making. If you're going to make an action figure and you're going to cast it up and make a mold of it, it'll basically lose its shape. And it's also good. It's almost like sketching. You almost want to like be able to be a concept and then maybe take it this way and just get better at your craft. I use the hard grade because I'm a little bit more used to it. Also, unlike water-based clay, if I made this out of water-based clay, it'll eventually shrink, dry up, and crack. And I have to constantly water it and cover it with wet towels. So this allows me to like step away and study it, maybe even try to think of a new concept. So always look at a sculpture kind of like a sketch as well. Don't ever like, and then don't be afraid to like just to work on something and you get stuck. Just give it a chance. Just walk away for a day or a week or something like that, and come back to it and see if you see anything that needs to be fixed. So it's a good way to do that if you have the option of a wax-based clay.
Let's see, so you had mentioned the clay, and we've seen this material inside of here, and I'll just kind of point our camera down here just a little bit. So as this stuff that's running inside of here, we start to see like there's a little bit of white material inside of there. Is that the oil or the wax kind of coming separate?
This is a wax. This is a wax medium, so it's probably separating just like it would anything else that you would cook in the microwave, like the fat coming off the beef when it starts to get cold.
So if you get something like this, it's not anything you need to worry about.
As you can see, I go like this, and it's blending back, and it's fine.
Okay.
It's not going to cause any trouble for what you're trying to create. You see, you got nice fluid, and you bring in this semi-solid right next to it, and it makes it less fluid. This will turn into like a paste. It'll turn into a hard clay eventually. So what you want to do is just get used to what you're using it for at the time. This is good for adding, and then as it gets cool on the piece, you do your refining.
One thing that I found unique is we can reuse this clay time after time, it seems like. Is there a limit? Is there anything we need to worry about?
Well, the thing you got to worry about the most is getting pollutants in there. When you're working with this and you're making molds of it, you're going to be making molds. You're going to make plaster molds. You're going to make fiberglass molds. What's going to happen is that you get residual pieces in there. You get fibers from your carpet in it, loose hairs, pet hair. You got a pet, it'll get in there. This stuff is really cool because what I do is I get those flour sifters from the dollar store, and if my clay gets too dirty, I just melt it down like fluid and pour it through and skim it with a spatula, and it'll actually separate all the pollutants from it so you can kind of recycle your clay. And then you don't have it pop up, because there's nothing worse than getting into something and a little hair just pops like out because it's dirty clay. So you might want to even consider that. You might want to separate your clays, make sure they're clean. Yeah, here it is. Let's see what it looks like. So this is my toolbox. I got my original tray in here still. This is a big array of all sorts of materials I've used. This is a dog brush pad I ripped off the handle. Creates amazing textures. I got it at the dollar store. This is Mary Kay's texture tool that she uses for, sorry about this, guy. This is what she uses for decorating her paint, so you can put the cool waves in there. It's good for sculpting too. Let's see, we got Sharpies. Always people to map things out. I am guilty of my favorite tools that I like to use are I buy chip brushes from the hardware store and turn them into like prison shanks. You can shape the handle and make yourself a little sculpting tool out of it so that you can sculpt away and then brush away. That works really well for that. These are pads for pushing around. This is good for water-based clay like that. And then if it's more firm, you want a metal base. Exact same tool, but it's metal based like that. Ping pong balls. There's a use for those. Let's see here. Let's go downstairs. This, I love this thing. This is what they call an embossing gun. And they use this. This is this Mary Kay? No, not Mary Kay. Sorry, who was her face? Martha Stewart. This is a Martha Stewart signature embossing gun. It's a heat gun that's very specific. You can really angle in and center on something and get it like that. Here's a big old texture tool right here. Let's see here. It's got teeth. This one hasn't gotten rusty yet. This is good for water-based clays. Where am I looking? Yes, 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 yes. This is a clay cutting tool. Very important that you get this. It is a steel wire, 2 good wooden handles. Don't buy the crappy ones with the small little dowel rods for handles. Those things break, and the thing. Spend the money, get the nice one. Look at these. When they got big honky handles like that, that's what you want right there. Little tiny crowbars. Go buy yourself. You see a little tiny crowbar, you buy it, even if you don't need it. Because you know what? You will. Trust me. Little baby crowbars are a wonderful investment. Here's some sponges, makeup sponges. You can use these mostly for water-based clays. This is good for creating texture. There's a thing you can do called stippling, where you can actually stipple it like it's makeup, literally like on the clay, and create a skin texture so that when it dries, it throws off the eye that much. Let's see. This is for hair, but I've used it for texture tools as well. So it's a mixture of all sorts of fun things. You're going to make some tools, you're going to buy some tools. You learn the different kinds of material that you're using, the clays. Let's see. This is a dental tool for teeth. This is good for detail right here because it gets right up in those crannies and gets that detail. You can get right there. You can sculpt an iris inside a clay eyeball with that. That's a fun shape. This is the one I was telling you about. So you get those fun little...
Where you can go in and get that.
Yeah, see, these shapes, they make sense to somebody when they're in the middle of making something. This doesn't make sense to you until you're making something. You're like, oh, yes. Yeah,
that's
the one I told you about. That's a fun tool.
I want to play with that.
This is a nice, get the knife This is a dull knife for cutting water clay, and this is good for mold making, and this is something that we can get into later. This is that fancy Japanese steel. So get yourself one of these. These things, you'll use this, and don't let it get nicked up because you want this to be smooth. Treat this thing like your top shelf chef knife. Here's the big honker I made right here. I showed you that earlier.
Can we go back to that Japanese knife that you just had? Does that have any serration? What is that?
I got two. They grow.
They're just tapered in. Okay, they have no serration, just tapered in.
Yeah, it's no serration. It's got a flat side and a tapered side. And this thing is made, obviously, I'm a lefty, but this is obviously made for a right-handed person because it creates a straight line on one particular side and then it puts a bevel cut on this side. This is very important for when you're cutting strips of clay and you are making clay walls or you're doing build-up. But this is really good for getting nice, sharp things because your approach to how you make a sculpture is everything. And that also includes armatures.
Got it.
When you make an armature, that is something that you would build onto with the clay. If I was to make this out of solid monster clay, it would be very heavy. It could fall and break, but this piece is very resilient because of the way I made it. So what I did is I got some tomato cage wire and created an armature shaped pretty much like she is now. This clay in some places is super thin. As you can see down here, there's a PVC pipe. And the PVC pipe runs all the way here. You can see the PVC cross section through the arm. So if I want to add armatures to here to create arms, that would be the way I would do it. If I wanted to mold this piece, it would be a pain to mold it with the arms on it. It might be easier for me to pop them off. This is how they make action figures, like McFarlane Toys and all that. This is the exact same way you make toys. So you see the light through there? It goes all the way through. It's the four-way PVC joint. And again, it's PVC. It's lightweight. So this lady, she's probably about maximum 1/4 inch thick in most places. The head is actually hollow. I can't show that, but she was in the mold and I poured it and slushed it out. And what happens is this stuff, as it cools, it built up into layers like plaster. So her head's actually empty. But the thing is, you can see how tough this stuff is too. It goes on like fluid when you melt it down in the microwave. You do your texture on there. And it's very light. And it's very easy for me to spin and constantly work on. It's actually sitting on an anatomical skull stand. It's laced on there with this big bolt. So you see how light this thing and how easily I can move it around. These are ping pong balls for eyes. These were the things that I used to set up the entire reference for how this thing was made. This is something that I've been working on for a very long time, and I've done several versions of it. So people are always like, oh, it's the same thing. Like, well, it looks the same to you, but not to me. If I actually laid out the versions of this thing and put them side by side, you'd be like, totally different. That's another thing you got to be able. You got to be able to just learn from yourself and perfect what you do.
What's the reason you're making this?
This right here, I wanted to make an anime because I saw a lot of anime sculptures, dolls. They had painted on eyes. I didn't like that. I thought that was kind of a cop-out. So I wanted to sculpt to scale a piece like this. This is actually the size of a 5-foot anime female. So this is something I've been working on for a while to perfect. And the thing is that when you make something like that, it's kind of like a composite piece. So I could turn this into a mermaid, or I could turn it into an alien creature. I could create a lot of things with this. This is kind of a tool in itself. And you can take it lots of different ways. The only way you could do that is if you make something very generic. Because if you make a zombie and he's melted face, he's going to always be a melted face zombie. I work for a company called Ghost Ride, where they actually had casts of people's heads and arms, very normal. Sometimes they were yelling, frozen, yelling face. And the thing is that they had those, and they could turn those into zombies whenever they felt like it, or they could make it look like this. So that's something you got to think about when you're making a sculpture, or you're getting into mold making, you're making products. If you make a very specific design, it'll always be that design. If you make something pretty generic, it can go lots of different ways. So this is an example of a mask that is made on an armature. The armature is actually that yellow head you see right there. That is made with a generic anatomical correctness that would be a customer's head. So when you see these mask making companies, silicone mask making, latex mask, they use an armature, which is a generic head form that was probably designed on a computer. And the idea there you see on the other side of the clay is that is a monster concept that came up, or a monster mask for a film. And the thing is, I wanted to show this one in particular because you can see where the anatomy is totally construed from the natural human face. So you see the little piggy nose on top of the sacrum. You see the mouth is basically taking up almost the entire lower face. The idea is to give off the illusion of a distorted face. So you play with anatomy. You see the zygomatic or cheekbones been emphasized a little bit, and the furrow of the brow comes in tight. That's to distort the face and throw off the look of a human. And so these are the little things that you do when you design a mask. I did this split on purpose to show a director. So when you're trying to do a pitch for a film and you want to be the effects makeup person like that, something like this is a great visual for somebody that's a DP or a cameraman or a director, and he wants to get an idea of what this thing looks like. You could draw a picture, you can explain it to your blue in the face, but these three pictures, boom, boom, boom. Now they got the idea straight away, and we're talking about concepts and stuff like that. But just to let everybody see that, that is roughly how latex masks are made. That's how silicone masks are made. And that is a core that is basically the same size as a person would look. The hat size, the male or female kid size, you got to emphasize that kind of thing, and you got to just try to appeal to a general audience. Well, for one thing, it's cheaper and faster than 3D printing the piece that needed to be made out of the same material. Also, you have the ability to shapeshift this around in minutes, which would take hours with a 3D printer. There's a company called Kemper Tools, which is probably the first one that I would suggest. They have the most diverse tools that I like the way they work. Like I said earlier, you will find along the way the thing that's going to work out best for what you're trying to create. Sometimes you just want to have a rustic look. You want that tool look inside it, just like you see at the fine arts museums with Rodin and Degas. And so you've got these tools like this, which have all sorts of texture points to them. I went to a school for it. I went to Douglas Education Center way back in 2004. Glad I went. It was basically 15 months of shop time. It's basically what the education was. Nowadays, we're going to have to do a lot of online courses. Dan Winston Studios offers some courses. There's plenty of guys on YouTube that teach. Make sure that they're an accredited person. There's a lot of safety things that are overlooked on YouTube because there's a lot of people that make stuff that enjoy haunted houses and movies, but they're not really trained in a safe manner, professional way. So you got to be careful of that. Books, research, R&D, research and design. Just you got to read. Everybody that ever asked me about going get in the effects business, read. Makeup Artist Magazine, Cinefex. These are all production magazines. Watch production notes on Blu-rays are great now because you can get the nerd deep production notes on how everything's made practical and how it's tied in with VFX. You can learn about special effects makeup and how it ties in to computer graphics and stuff like that. It's an amazing field. And what happens is the more you learn about that business, you get onto a movie set, you talk about what you know, and they'll be like, oh, it's a good idea, and that's what gets you jobs. As far as your own personal pursuits, it's always good to just refine what you do, learn. It's an ever-changing field. People are always coming up with new ways of doing something, innovative ways you didn't think of before. It's a common medium, but it's just like magic. There's a lot of magicians that know how to do magic, but there's magic tricks that that particular guys know they're not sharing. And then there's a new way of doing a magic trick that you never thought of before. So as far as how this could tie into fine arts, effects has been really great for that. I went to school for fine arts in San Francisco, and I dropped out because of it was just a costly fine arts degree. Special effects got me so many more jobs. It's a trade. It's an artisan. It's opened a lot of doors for me. I've worked in the medical field, worked on movies. I've worked for companies that built things for the Bellagio. I have made things for theme parks. There's some interesting things going to happen in Universal Studios. That's all I can tell you in the coming years. So the only way to get exposed to that is to get the knowledge, learn how the stuff's made. Exactly what I already learned. I just wish that I had learned it sooner. Because what happens is throughout time, you start to find different ways to make something. I was taught how to make molds a certain way by these people. And then I started figuring out my own ways of making molds. And you kind of like can defy the rules. It's like they said on Matrix, you can't break the rules, but you can bend them.
Right.
So that's the reality of this medium. And so I've got techniques that I do that I keep close to the chest that are mine. I like to throw in some ideas and some advice. You learn about how things are made. You learn about how silicone behaves. You learn about the chemical breakdowns. You learn about the solvents and how they cross-reference, stuff like that. You learn about different ways of making something with a different medium. I work at a company right now making stuff for the medical industry, radiology, testing, and I work with engineers that are way more educated than me in engineering, but then I got a trade craft that I can kind of do stuff that they didn't think of before. I find ways to save them money. I find ways to make them better products. And so it bleeds into Makerspace. I come down here, I look at what Beau's making something, and I'm seeing him fight with that mold, and that's just making me sad. I'm like, no, 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 no. Remaking the mold, we're gonna make it nice. We're gonna make a good looking product. You're not gonna be killing yourself. You're gonna pop. Out comes your product. That way you can get rolling smooth. You're not breaking your fingers.
It's always interesting to see your eye when you look at something and can see a part line or a way to do this. And sometimes it's not just a one-part mold or a two-part. It might be a three-part or something more complex inside of here. But you're able to look at that and see that. I know that that's
like
experience.
Like the soap bar mold, the big gang mold.
Yeah.
Remember we were trying to get an impression in the wax, and I was trying to explain to you. I said, how do you get the imprint in the soap box when you're making it from what the CNC router?
Yep.
The positive for making the silicone mold. So you want to make a silicone mold that makes an impression, but in order to do that, you have to make a depression to make an impression. And we had to work backwards from
having to,
that.
Yeah, because we're doing a mold versus the cast versus the original, thinking which one is up and which one is down. So which one is above in the surface or going to be embossed.
You're like, so the CNC router is supposed to have an impression. No, it's supposed to have an impression.
Which means now we have to take everything else away except that part, which is now 15 hours of CNC milling time.
Exactly. So it's reverse engineering. You got to see things upside down and backwards. And sometimes that's you need consultation. You can't do all the thinking sometimes. So that's the good thing about Makerspace is that we all can get together. Beau can count on me. He calls me up anytime. Tech advice, I'm here.
Yeah.
I got tech advice. He helps me out with computers, 3D printing, the solid model making, all of that, the parametrics. He's got it down. This is the place to do it. So this is a perfect place for fusing mediums, fusing talents.
Thanks again to Scott for being here, for sharing his Makers Toolbox.
Not a problem.
As well as everything that you've kind of brought, and you've really helped to transform what the Makerspace has been in terms of what people make around here, what they create, and just how to take an idea and make something new with that.
It's always about working together, and it's always trying to find the light bulb, find a way to make somebody else's process a little bit easier for them. And sometimes they just can make something new that they didn't think of before just by showing something that has nothing to do with the medium that you're doing. And you guys out there, you see everything we did. You guys get any idea, any questions you have? We're trying to get an idea of what we're looking for down the road for continuing education, continuing tutorials. So it would help a lot with your feedback about what you think about what you saw today and what you think we could do that you would like to see.